So this is another of these papers that we are looking at from the series. This is about characteristic processes of human evolution caused the Anthropocene and may obstruct its global solution. So we are repeating some of the points. Essentially, you got the point that the way we have evolved, it has made us what we are, many strengths in it in the way we are dominating the planet, but our ability now has become kind of an Icarus paradox, right? Icarus was so powerful in flying, so strong wings that uh, he thought he will fly all the way to the sun and got burned. So, in some sense, that's where we are. We propose that the global environmental crises of the Anthropocene are the outcome of a ratcheting process in long-term human evolution, which has favored groups of increased size and greater environmental exploitation. So crises is a terminology that I don't always agree with, but it doesn't matter in this context. Ratcheting is basically a ratchet is something that just turns things in one way. So if you have a ratchet that tightens the bolt or loosens the bolt, so you cannot have it go both ways. So you lock it and you just tighten it or you loosen it. So when you have a ratcheting process in the evolution, then it's forcing you to go in a certain way and you keep growing bigger and bigger, upscale or downscale or become stable and so on. So these ratcheting processes are identified and argued in many of these papers in this series. To explore this hypothesis, we review the changes in the human ecological niche. So that means we evolved into a climate that existed, and then we started to modify the environment and the climate and began to adapt to it and became bigger and bigger. So it's a niche construction ability that we have. Evidence indicates the growth of the human niche has been facilitated by group level cultural traits for environmental control. Following this logic, sustaining the biosphere under intense human use will probably require global cultural traits, including legal and technical systems. So we are trying to evolve some of those under the UNFCCC, Paris Agreement, and so on. We estimate that our species does not exhibit adequate population structure to evolve these traits. So we are very good at within group cooperation to dominate, and then we compete with other groups or we trade with other groups. So it's a cooperation that is of mutual benefit. But if somebody else is doing the same thing, then we, you know, compete with them. And obviously, humans are always creating wars because you're trying to control resources or there are some other cultural affinities that don't match and so on, right? So are those beneficial for global action or not? Bad news is that here this paper concludes actually those are a handicap. We estimate that our species does not exhibit adequate population structure to evolve these traits. So we're not going to get there. Our analysis suggests that characteristic patterns of human group level cultural evolution created the Anthropocene and will work against global collective solutions to the environmental challenges it poses. So we are good at doing all these global scale exploitation, trading, collective exploitation, and then we are trying hard to bring about global sustainability, but maybe sustainability and sustaining the commons can only work at smaller scales like Eleanor Ostrom discovered and will never add up to a global cooperation, which is what is needed for sustainability. We illustrate the implications of this theory with alternative evolutionary paths for humanity, and then the question is whether we'll be able to accomplish it or we are capable of it. We conclude that our species must alter long-standing patterns of cultural evolution to avoid environmental disaster and escalating between group competition. We propose an applied research and policy program with the goal of avoiding these outcomes. This article is part of the theme issue, Evolution and Sustainability, Gathering the Strands for an Anthropocene Synthesis. So I won't read all the details on these policy and research agenda and so on, but I'll give you enough sense of what this main message here is because, again, advocacy on including evolutionary aspects into global action must happen, but I'm not sure when and if it will happen. we keep thinking mitigation, adaptation, technology, 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 and maybe that's how it will happen. Who knows? Our species has come to dominate Earth's ecosystems. This has been termed the Anthropocene, a geological epoch, which actually is not so, defined by stratigraphic signatures of human activity, such as concentrations of carbon dioxide and radioisotopes, but we are not yet officially there. The Anthropocene creates a novel evolutionary condition for both the biosphere and our species. Our exponential population growth, dramatic environmental modification, and technological systems have created a novel evolutionary environment for humanity, which may entail existential risk for humanity. So there are a lot of heuristic arguments. Also, human environmental impacts are on course to constitute one of the larger extinction events over approximately 3.7 billion years of life. So this is not, are we going extinct? Many other species are facing serious issues. So this is different than the previous mass extinctions, which happened because of meteorite crashes and volcanic eruptions and so on and so forth. Research that does connect human evolution to anthropogenic environmental impacts highlights two key factors: the role of culture and the importance of group structure and cooperation. We are supposed to be very good at cooperation, which is what made us so good in, agriculture and technology. But now, intergroup competition, the group structures are now not uh, beneficial trait for global cooperation. The evolution of human culture, including language, is widely understood to be a central feature of human evolution and is increasingly recognized as important in understanding human environmental behavior. However, the role of culture in human environmental impact is complex. On the one hand, Ulrich and Ehrlich suggest humanity created the Anthropocene through cultural evolution. On the other, human culture is seen as necessary to achieve sustainability through cooperative solutions. Thus, adaptive cultural evolution is implicated both as a cause of global environmental decline and the key to spread policies and solutions to mitigate anthropogenic impacts. So, the evolutionary question then is, are we capable of mitigating anthropogenic impacts to be sustainable? So it has been proposed that human evolution can be described as an evolutionary transition in inheritance and individuality, which is beyond just genetic evolution. So that is evolutionary transition 2. In this paper, we develop a hypothesis that human domination of the biosphere is a unique consequence of this ongoing human evolutionary transition and explore the implications. Our effort is in the spirit of developing uh, the novel theory necessary for unprecedented challenges of our time. So I'm not going to go into many details because there are many papers cited here, very nice long list of citations that talk about how many people argue that we are still in the middle of our evolution, that this is just a transition stage, so evolutionary transition is happening, but is it heading towards the right direction for global sustainability? So there are ideas of human evolutionary ratchets will that help explain the Anthropocene, which we already looked at in some ways, that the way we evolved with language, with opposable thumbs, with tool building and group cooperation, group hunting, group fishing, and then individual power, tributary power of a tribal leader who may be very good at leading expeditions for hunting or gathering or even conquering other places which have more resources and so on, which is all what brought us to hunting and gathering, to agriculture. Climate stability allowed us to grow in population, and then steam engine, innovation, industrial revolution, fossil fuels, emissions, and Anthropocene, right? So I won't read all this long text, but basically there are ideas that the first, hypothesis suggests that human evolution is dominated by a positive feedback between adaptive capacity of human culture, which generates group level adaptations, and the strength of human groups which employ them. So you get good at agriculture, as I said before, and you produce more food, population grows, then you want to produce more food. So the groups that can do this survive, others who cannot will go extinct, which has happened over the Holocene. So this is a fitness export when the shift is in the bulk of adaptive information from genes to culture. So it's not just genetic adaptation that's helping you, it's a cultural evolution that's also helping you. So there is the shift in human organization from individuals to groups, a defining pattern of evolutionary transitions in individuality or ETIs, generally referred to as ETIs. This shift is characterized by increases in the spatial and social scale of societies and their degree of internal cooperation. Like other ETIs, the human ETI ET2 evolutionary transition two involves a positive feedback mechanism which drives the emergence of a higher level of organization and individuality. So these are the examples of the IPCC, the UNFCCC, Paris Agreement, and all these things, right? So looks like we are capable of doing global action, global cooperation, and yet we are not quite succeeding. So you can look at it as sorry, I have a frog in my throat. I know it may make horrible sound in the recording, but sorry about that. So, proposals for the Anthropocene geological epoch have placed its onset in the middle of the century, but this has already been rejected. What are the ideas? An evolutionary ratchet of environmental intensity. So, we keep ratcheting up or down in one direction. The positive feedback system of ET2A entails additional positive feedback, so that's here, in which group level cultural innovations in environmental management tend to increase the scale and intensity of environmental modification and extraction, which in turn accelerates the proliferation of cultural groups with those innovations. So people export fish, people export food. We are still living by this model now. Renewables, so China has, let's say, all the lithium, cobalt, nickel, whatever. It begins to dominate, and it has, an impact on the environment. Everybody needs it, so we are going to compete and cooperate in many ways, form alliances. So here, evolutionary ratchet of the evolutionary transition to adaptive value of group cultural traits feeding into growth and proliferation of cultural groups. Cultural groups here are very broadly interpreted as, let's say, all the companies that are building phones and buying minerals of certain type, or all the traders of oil, or people who are building solar panels. You can think of many groups, and that feeds back into adaptive value of group cultural traits. So you have a ratcheting going on here, which also feeds back then from this group cultural traits into the intensity and scale of environmental modification. The more iPhones you sell, the more intense is going to be the exploitation of the resources to build the iPhones, right? So the evolutionary ratchet of the environmental impact and control then interacts with this evolutionary ratchet, and here positive feedback, fitness value of extracted material and energy. That's going to feed into growth and proliferation. Is China growing tremendously? Yes, it is, because of various ways in which it can build and sell things and has exploitation of natural resources at larger and larger scale. So everybody is exploiting. And this cumulative process extends from the emergence of cultural transmission in the Homo lineage, and includes collective environmental practices such as cooperative hunting, herding, fishing, agriculture. Ongoing iterations of growth, elaboration, and expansion have resulted in both continental scale societies of immense power and the global environmental impacts they have engendered. Okay, so I won't read this part about the evolution of the human ecological niche. This again is about how good we are at, how we evolved maybe in a niche. And when environmental change, climate change happened, let's say naturally, we could move around, find new places, make new exploitations, and exploit the environment, change the environment, adjust to the changed environment, exploit more, growing population. So we are good at not only finding niches, but constructing niches out of those situations. And then also we have created cultural niche constructions. Of evolutionary history, the human niche has changed dramatically, and there is a long, big table that I'm not going to read. I'm not even sure I included it. Yeah, I have included it. So there are other details about the, how uh, we have evolved and how we have become very good at exploiting the environment, changing the environment, growing in scale of the exploitation, and cooperating to exploit even more by trading and competing, having wars, and so on. So, group level cultural traits for environmental control are part of this evolution. The Gaia hypothesis is proposed, but obviously it doesn't work. So, what is happening? The population structure problem of the human evolutionary transition required then comes down to this. We can use this basic understanding of the evolution of group level environmental management to explore the prospects for a sustainable or well managed biosphere. It will need human evolution that is driven by group level cultural evolution in the very long term. So, the evolution of the second type so far, evolutionary transition 2, suggests that human evolution is driven by group level cultural evolution, which requires a population of groups. Evolutionary competition between groups is a key process in evolutionary transition 1 that strengthens group level identities and solidifies group level control of individuals and resources. So it may be a tribal leader or a democracy of some sort with power by consent where you elect a leader, or it's a dictator, king, queen, whatever, right? Global sustainability, on the other hand, requires global cultural traits for environmental management. Are we capable of that? The scale of environmental management traits lags behind the scale of society. So we have smaller scale societies. Extractive traits are obviously preceding the expansion of human groups. However, the cultural traits for environmental management at a given scale seem to emerge most robustly within societies of scale, which means once a society realizes its water and air are getting polluted, they can have regulations to control them within the society. But if there are international borders being crossed, then it becomes very difficult. Evolution in a population of sub-global groups favors the emergence of sub-global traits for environmental control. But that's not enough for you know global control that we need, global governance that we need right now. This is a large table with some details here about how the realized ecological niche, start of the period, species of population, population of larger cities, and so on have worked. I'm not going to go through this, but basically we are talking about most recent common ancestors growing back to primate omnivores 3 million years ago or so, and hominin expansion going to about 2 million to half a million years ago. Modern human, so we are apex omnivores at this time, approximately, let's say 200,000 years ago. Global expansion, again, apex omnivore and ecosystem engineer. We started to do serious ecosystem engineering, which started about 70,000 years ago in the middle of the last ice age. And agricultural revolution happened about 10,000 years ago with the end of the Ice Age and the beginning of the Holocene. Industrial Revolution, approximately 220 years ago, we are now completely controlling the landscape with organic and inorganic metabolism, which means we are growing food and consuming, we are exploiting materials and consuming. So the Anthropocene is the human controlled landscapes with organic, inorganic metabolisms. Are we going towards a hypothetical cultural superorganism in the post transition? Well, that's not so sure. Sounds fancy, but that's not so obvious, right? So there is a population structure problem of the human evolutionary transition too. To evolve the traits necessary to maintain a sustainable planetary environment, a population of global scale societies is required. Short of gaining access to new livable planets, this problem appears to have no simple solution and poses mounting dangers for human survival and biosphere stability in the coming millennia. Well, millennia is a long time in the future, but you have to now decide whether you're optimistic or pessimistic. Are we able to find solutions, energy, food, water, agriculture, transportation, health, buildings, infrastructure, and become safe, the Anthropocene of sustainable human beings, or are we going to really head to uh, some instability and extinction? I'm optimistic, and I think we are going to find solutions. So this is more talk on how navigating the Anthropocene will require a research agenda, policy framework, strategies. So as the Anthropocene and evolutionary transition too are linked by the scale of environmental control and cooperation, they may imply or require. So let me read it again properly. The Anthropocene and the evolutionary transition too are linked by the scale of the environmental control and cooperation they imply or require. The ET2 operations, ET2 operates on human cooperation over time, which global environmental challenges require. Also, the Anthropocene is defined by its global scale, the scale that human impacts have recently breached. There are ideas of planetary boundaries and so on. So this term breach, these are all kind of, heuristic arguments. So you have to read and make sure you decide on your own what we mean by that. Thus, we reason that factors and changes that influence human evolution and the evolutionary transition too will have relevance for global environmental challenges and vice versa. So there's another figure that kind of hypothetically puts it in terms of spatial scale of environmental control from local to global. And here we are looking at intensity of cooperation from zero cooperation to working on food, defense, trade, shelter, social roles, health and environment, and then reproduction up here to complete evolutionary transition. Either will go extinction by conflict if the cooperation, the spatial scale of environmental control remains local and we have no global control, or we are somewhere in the middle here. I will read what it means. And population structure problem here can bring us to global sustainability if the transition is complete and the spatial scale of environmental cooperation, environmental control really reaches global scale. So we have global sustainability frontiers. But here we have climate change frontier, which we are already facing. So we may have a dieback and a biosphere collapse and come back to here, local cooperation and smaller intensity of cooperation within society. So this is the dimension of environmental management that creates an attractor landscape for long-term human evolution. Environmental sustainability challenges are these curved frontiers here, right? That require a minimum level of cooperation in a society of a certain minimum spatial size. Alternative potential paths move humanity toward different long-term evolutionary outcomes. In path B, competition between societies here uh, over common environmental resources creates cultural selection between groups of increasingly direct competition and conflict. That's not what we want. In path A, growing cooperation between societies facilitates the emergence of here global cultural traits to preserve shared environmental benefits. Is this all imagination? Not really, because if we are capable of, directed evolution, that we can choose to evolve culturally, socially, normatively, and so on, then we can, in fact, reach global cooperation. The question still is whether our evolutionary traits are a barrier to this, or actually they can allow us to reach this stage. So there are lots of nice points about the research agenda, and you can see how it can work. Human Development Index and per capita CO2 are now related in a way that you can only get better livelihood, better life standard of living by increasing your carbon footprint. But is there a different way to do it? Is there a way to keep it flat so that your carbon footprint doesn't go up, but your development index, your standard of living, quality of life goes up? On the other hand, if you look at income versus or corporate revenues versus CO2 emissions, that relation also is somewhat increasing with increasing revenue, but you can see that there is a lot of inefficiency in the system in many ways. There are many uh, uh, industries, let's say corporations that have various levels of emissions for similar level of revenue. So does that give you a pathway to reduce everybody's emissions downward while increasing revenue? So it comes down to energy, let's say carbon footprint of energy and energy footprint of GDP in a very simple way. So obviously I'm skipping lots of details. Should I read all the details? Well, let me just read this. We have suggested that humanity might be poorly adapted to survive a new evolutionary relationship to the biosphere, which needs to happen for global sustainability, even if this proposition is only slightly likely or, uh, I screwed this up somehow. Yeah, or partially true, it deserves sharp attention. We hope that our raising the issue strikes new alarms and helps to motivate greater efforts at collective action. So the good news of Eleanor Ostrom's work that sustaining the commons is possible at small scales. Can we somehow grow it into a global scale and somehow drive this evolutionary transition, which we may be capable of, at least we are capable of at small groups, but will it work to become a global community? Well, at least we know what the problems are and what the handicaps are. So maybe that'll help us to think about it better and drive a research agenda and strategies to make it happen. This podcast is a bit long, but it's a good topic. So even though I kept it brief, it became a little long, but it's okay. See you in the next topic.